and also like they have educational they have lack of education of understanding like technical things that's going on. So my observation, and I have a proposal also to make for them. My observation is that when they are growing their like mixed crops like vegetables, they actually share the parcel of the land. Maybe that's owned by a particular landowner, but they are like growing there like multiple farms. They separate the rows and also grows different vegetables like carrots, onions, garlic, etc. And my knowledge says that openity maybe cannot kind of like give them information in that kind of mixed cropping rows where multiple growers are working. So that's one situation, is that when there will be certain rules and regulation and fees for over extraction. So maybe some farmers will use the fair portion, like fair share of water, but the other farmer might extract like more water. So in that case, if they get the penalties like parcel basis or like for the whole parcel, then it will be kind of unfair to the other farmers who are sharing the parcel like with one another. And second is that they have language barrier and educational lack of education. Therefore, like they do not have access to this kind of education and outreach material unless they are reached out to. I went to the field. That's how I knew about that, because like we have colleagues working on different grants and support for them. So they usually get to know about them when they are reached out to. So my proposal is there any way that we can talk about the adjustment of fees based on their like farm size, their yearly income, because most of their yearly income is maybe less than or equal to $100,000 per year. So I think like kind of sliding scale based fees, or maybe set up any threshold like the de minimis well users, like if they are using particular amount of water, maybe setting up a threshold for the small scale farmers in this area so that they can kind of get as that they can be regarded as like exempt from those over extraction fees. So these are my observation, and I'm happy to help you in any way possible for the small scale farmers. And if I said anything wrong or like any wrong information, I'm happy to be corrected about this.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Any public comment online? Moving right along, item number 3 are the minutes. So they were in the packet that was emailed. There's 3 sets of minutes. We don't have a quorum, so we're not going to take action. So just let me know if you've got any comments or edits to those minutes, and we will bring them back before the TAC at your March meeting. And then number 4 is why we're all here, and this is the continued discussion of the allocation rule concept. And today we're going to be discussing the alternative source language. So this language is available to those who are here in the room, and for those online, it's posted on the website, Merced Subbasin Gsa.org, under the TAC tab on the top, the Technical Advisory Committee tab, and it's under meeting minutes or meeting materials for the February 25th meeting. And that's the document that the rest of the committee is looking at here in the room. This is a continuation of the language that the committee saw last week, last month. Last month was on monitoring and consumption, and this is rolling into alternative sources of water. And I am going to hand it over to Greg for starting to walk us through this document. And if you want, if Adriel wants to post to share something online for those, if you want to do that, I'll make it available for Adriel.
Yeah, I think we should make it available for Adriel to maybe walk through. Adriel, if you don't mind being able to share the working document, that might be.
Yeah, it's February. The date on the document that's posted online and is in the room is February 21st.
Go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So setting the overall context here again, I think is important. There was a rule, the allocation rule adopted back in October of last year that had a whole bunch of things getting set forth, and it had a bunch of sections in there that were highlighted to say to be drafted by April 1st. So working towards that, drafted by April 1st, a couple of the big sections were 1.8, which was monitoring, and this is where we start taking you. The rule talked about your allocation and what it is and how it's going to go forward, and then the monitoring that we've discussed and that's been brought before you before is about how we're going to be measuring your actual consumption so that we could then do a calculation against your available allocation or any other supplies. Well, the any other supplies is what starts with 1.8.4. So that's the alternative source piece that starts to come in. So in the monitoring document, it was essentially 1.8.1, 1.8.2, and 1.8.3. That's what was in the monitoring you saw before. And then this piece that we have online and in front of you in the room is 1.8.4, but it also includes and the ordering and whether some of these get subset or indented and other things. Just bear with us right now. But right now it's 1.8.4 through 1.8.11 is in this document you have in front of you. And so we're going to go through this document. So it's got 1.8.4 through 1.8.11. Just want to make sure that that's clear, and there's a variety of pieces. The big picture of what this accounting for alternative source piece is to recognize two primary things. A alternative source of water you have that you're going to use the current year. So let's hypothetically say we're at 2033. So we're out there, everything's operating. You happen to have a surface water source that year you're putting on your ground. This is how we're going to be tracking that and accounting for that and what you have to provide to us as a source you would be using instead of or in lieu of your groundwater that's in your allocation. There is also the fact that in that year of 2033, you might have so much water, either in abundance to what you're putting on your field that year, or just it came at a different time of year, that you're going to create recharge credits with that. So this is talking about two things that we're addressing here. One is the alternative source that you're going to use in that irrigation year, and a credit you might be creating in that year that then will become available in subsequent years. So those are the two things we're framing through this. So as long as that kind of is basically clear. There are some definitions. Some of these still need to be worked out. All these definitions will be folded into the original rule so that we create kind of things in sequence. Those will be redlined by the time we bring this forward here. This still might show up as separate independent document, but ultimately it'll all be merged together. So if we flip and go to page 3 in this document, we see that this starts with 1.8.4. And this is the part that Adriel has sitting online here. So what we have is there are 3 basic types of water that could be used to create an alternative source. One is a contracted surface water supply, which also includes a contract you might have of recycled water, which would, in that case, that recycled water contract would be, as it'll be defined, with an entity that has a point source discharge requirement, like a wastewater treatment plant or an industrial canning facility or something. So that's what we mean by recycled water in that case, as a contracted supply. It also can include seepage contracts. There are a few growers in this GSA that have seepage contracts with the Bureau. Then there's the surface water right. So that's separate and apart from a contract. And then there's flood water that might be diverted under section 1242.1 or other related executive orders. I'll make one other note here that one request that was put forward and that you see in this language is there is some look back to activities that may have happened in the last 5 years to create a credit, either by taking surface water or by creating a recharge through a source like flood water that was done in 2023. And so those are recognized within here as a pathway. All right,
Greg, seepage water contracts, those would have to be on file with DWR?
those
Or,
are, no, because DWR doesn't recognize those. Those are a
Okay.
contract that some growers have with the Bureau of Reclamation as part of the
Okay.
San Joaquin River
wrong
settlement.
bureau, sorry.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but it's, yeah, so
Okay.
Bureau would have it on file, but we'll need the grower to bring that to us as evidence.
Would that be, kind of like in our area where, the Stevenson has the canal and they've done a study to get that seepage number figured out? Is that what we're referring to there, or would that be
No.
something different?
That would be I'm gonna say a contracted supply. It's as a result of a legal settlement
Okay,
that Stevenson has a water right. And you'll see when we
It
go
ends up
into
with
the,
wet water.
we'll go into here,
It'll be in.
okay,
it talks about.
okay,
It
it's
talks about
later in.
direct
Okay.
recharge or indirect recharge, where indirect recharge occurs in relation to a conveyance facility.
Okay, all right,
So that Stevenson aspect is in relation to indirect recharge of a conveyance facility
okay,
compared to building a pond, like Brad's working on several recharge
Okay.
ponds where they are constructed direct recharge. Then there's also, LeGrand's Canal,
Laterals, it's gonna be open ditch, so.
which
Yeah,
will.
okay, so it's,
Factor
well,
on it.
that'll be later in here.
That's in here.
This is a different kind of seepage. That's all I really needed
So
to
that
figure
seepage
out.
contract
Okay.
is a specific thing with the Bureau. That other, we would consider to be either a water right or a contracted supply that may also have a seepage credit component from indirect recharge being conveyed to point A to point B.
As a point of reference, I think it'll help. These seepage contracts are all a result of re-watering the San Joaquin River for the salmon.
Okay,
So these are guys that used to have farm ground that are now gonna flood it out because of this new water.
okay,
Yeah, a lot of it's like sublateral seepage and it's made of ground muck. So like in George Park's case, they dug an interceptor canal that fills with water. And then they pump that out and actually distribute it out to their growers
oh, okay.
They farm with it.
under a contract.
I think just a little context.
Yeah, appreciate
And it's
it.
really specific to just a couple of people.
Yeah.
But it's a big deal to them. So
Right.
it has to be addressed.
Yeah, no, appreciate that.
Everybody's got their big deal.
Yeah.
So then we have, so that's the alternative sources of water can be those aspects that you're gonna need to get that approved. And then we go into creating credit. So if you're using that source water for that particular year, you're gonna be submitting information, like you have an MID contract. You're gonna give us at the end of the year how much water was delivered under that contract. It's gonna be applied and adjusted, and a subset of that will count towards your consumption under the rest of the monitoring approach.
Hey, Greg, is there any movement or? Yeah, I guess movement towards. MID being able to submit into the portal directly without it having to be like a paper trail or.
There's no movement towards that yet. The GAP, the groundwater accounting platform, will be able to accommodate that. But they're gonna need to be able to have something to go grab with some API ask, and I don't know. So I think what will likely be the easy first step is you as a grower will
Yeah.
just scan or take an electronic copy you got from MID, submit it through your.
The irrigation districts do it in other subbasins, where
I know.
they push it into.
Yeah.
So,
It's the technology works, but it's.
If they're willing to do it on their end, I think we would be willing to accept it
I'll
on
push
our.
it on there.
MID has.
Just for the growers and for you guys, I mean,
You know, it's,
I can
yeah,
tell you Stephanie is just overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
2023 crushed her with all the surface water,
Oh, yeah.
like,
In
just-
Madera.
yeah, in Madera, Stephanie and Agnes. It's all a bunch of faxes, or not fax, scans, I'm sorry. You know, she just got, I'm dating myself here. But it's just a lot of paperwork and then there's so much, there's gonna be 40,000 acre feet a year that goes from MID into this GSA.
If they are able to share that with us, as of today, MID has, we
Yeah.
asked, they have not shared with us who those contracts are with or where the water's going.
Or any history.
So
of what
we have to
that
get that
delivery's
from our growers directly right now, but in the future, if they're willing to share that information, that would be great.
I mean, it could, how much is delivered? You know, we get, every contract has a meter.
Well, I know, MID
And
won't,
that should go straight.
MID has not shared who has contracts with them or what they've been delivered in the past.
Like what APN they deliver it to.
So we don't know at this point. The only people that can tell us is the APN holder or that account holder. If we can facilitate and
Is it a breakdown between Gsa and Merced Irrigation District?
No,
it's a breakdown with MID.
I'll see what I can do, because that,
that,
for the growers and
Yeah.
the customers.
Mhm.
Just- I was at their last board meeting, and for the 2025 water year, the 40,000 acre feet is more a part of their budget than their in-district growers. You were there too.
the dollars are bringing in.
Yeah, it's like 14 million for the out of district and like 12 million for the in-district. For
Not surprised.
revenue. So they can help us out.
They're
And
outside.
push that to you guys through the portal that we chose because
Yes,
there's,
because we're all together.
yeah,
Yes,
that's why I pushed for it.
totally agree.
We're all on board, Brad.
We
Gotcha.
all share the same objective there, whether we can get it happening right off the bat. Let's see. But yes, that would be ideally where we end up.
I have the
This-
benefit of hand delivering those checks in. A lot of them.
So so you should ask them to be able to do a cash app where you can just like do
Yeah.
it from your house, like scan checks. Sorry, charge them. All right, so now we're gonna move into generating alternative source credit by recharge. So the first step is you have an alternative source. If you're using it that year, you're just gonna be submitting some information to us. It might be a water right off the Merced River, or a temporary urgency petition or something, or it might be a Stevenson supply, whatever it is. If they're gonna use that year, we're gonna need to have that evidence presented so we can make sure the right accounts are tracking that water. Then we have credits. So now we go into alternative source credits, and what we're talking about is direct recharge or indirect recharge. Through direct recharge, we're talking about either a permitted ASR well, a recharge basin, a permitted dry well, or a sublateral recharge system. So
What does permanent dry well mean? What's the definition of that?
I'm wondering why we dropped Floodmar off here. Sorry, I thought it was still part of. My bad. So let me answer your question, permitted dry well. So you can physically, and there's several that are going up and down the valley. There's been a lot in Arizona and other places in urban stormwater settings, but there's a few in the valley that are dug 80 to 120 feet deep, 4-foot diameter. Punch down, backfill with a lot of different gravels and materials and fines, and then there's usually a settling basin, and then an overflow where the water spills into there. In order to punch something like that, you have to have a permit from the State Water Resource or Regional Water Quality Control Board that you could inject or basically allow water to get down towards the aquifer surface. So they have to be permitted. It's not cumbersome, but there's a permitting requirement. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I thought it was a well that just went dry and I could use it.
Well, you could get it turned into that. That would be more of an, if you were gonna reverse the pump and push it down,
Yeah. or like
physically, or just gravity flow.
Gravity.
Yeah, we would still just need to get a permit for it. Cause imagine you took your Dairy Lagoon water and just pushed it.
No, but let's just say I'm gonna take my, the contracted water I have with MID and I'm gonna meter it back into that dry well.
That we just have, regional board just has to know, and
Why would they have to know if I'm not getting the water from them? Why can't I just,
because you're putting surface water into the
Okay.
ground, which is a point discharge, that they have a permitted authority responsibility for.
Okay.
It's a regulatory step. It's not cumbersome, but it is a regulatory step so that if something happened, guess what?
There's circumstances where you don't need a permit, but it's really gray and it's very complicated. It has to do with the distance between the bottom of the dry well and the top of the potable water. It's all about drinking water. This is, everything he's talking about is about drinking. But
So if your well's screened down into a section that used to pump water, it's gonna need to be permitted.
yeah, you wouldn't want to do it without.
For your own liability protection.
Yeah,
So what was it on the flood? So Floodmar was on here and it should be still in here because it was a concept. So Adriel, do you recall
Because it's not a facility.
We changed the term to over irrigation. So it's listed in the definitions, but it's not necessarily a true facility type.
Oh, okay. So it's a pathway.
We'll
Right.
probably need to make that a little bit clearer in here.
Yeah, we'll make that clear again. So the idea was that there is some period of time when it's considered an over irrigation, using an existing irrigation system to put out onto the ground to percolate as legitimate recharge credit. There will still be some refinement. I don't think. Let's see, what do we say here on over irrigation? Oh yeah, it's not defined yet, so it's on the bullets, definitions. But in some subbasins, they cut it off and say nothing past like April 1st or middle of March could be considered flood mark, because that's when you're going maybe into your more typical irrigation season. So they're trying to separate from percolation and deep percolation you have had as of course of regular irrigation activity versus an application of water that was in addition and purposeful, not for irrigation purposes, but to try and get water into the ground. It's a gray area, so we're gonna need to refine and define that, but that is a way to get recharge credit. I think a lot of the TUP was gonna be flood marsh stuff, right, Brad?
Yeah.
As opposed to basins.
Yeah.
So it's allowed, we'll probably bring it back in here to make sure it's clear. And then we have at the bottom of page 3, indirect recharge requires a party to own or control or be the designated beneficiary of the owner of a conveyance facility where the routing of water through the facility may result in recharge and alternative source via seepage. This is, we'll take 2 examples. We got the east side canal company's canal.
Right.
Who conveys water on behalf of Stevenson and McQueen. Somehow there's a seepage credit that will be made available and designated out to people. And there'll have to be some recognition of how that's calculated and how it's accounted for. No different than LeGrand Athlone with their distribution canal they're building. And who exactly is going to benefit from those things? How is that controlled? So there's a couple of things that will need to go along with that. We would need to know which accounts get the credit, essentially, at the end of the day. So for continuing on into the top of page 4, registration of a recharge facility. So we are going to need some documents that don't exist yet, the registration form, so people can say, here's my facility, here's where it is, here's some information about it. So we know where it is, we can attach it to an allocation management account, so we know who's related to that particular recharge facility.
We have the registration form for the 2023 framework
Yes,
that we
right.
can use.
Template to start from.
Yeah, so that should not be a
Yeah, I don't see it as a.
heavy lift, yeah.
But since somebody was asking attestation for something earlier already, I was just making a point. Form doesn't exist fully yet then.
We just have a Bible that
Then we go to determining alternative source credits. So in this case, we are, this is where we're starting to get, and we need some understanding of what's going on with your facility, and that you need to tell us how much water went into that on some report each year by the middle of December. And that as a result of that, we will create a credit minus a leave behind determination. So if you brought 1,000 units in and put it into a recharge basin, that's the easiest way to really think about this. 1,000 units went into a recharge basin. We, well, first you registered the recharge basin, and then in year 1, you brought in 1,000 units, like great. Now we're gonna apply a leave behind, and there's gonna be a number that's put now into your account that will be available into that next year. It's not available the same year because you're telling us at the end of that year. If you want any of that water to be used the same year, then it was just a direct alternative source use in lieu of groundwater that year, and it's not going to be created credit. It's either one or the other. Bottom of the page 4, determining leave behind. There's been a lot of conversation about this. The current representation in this draft is 10% of that number will be deducted, the measured quantity. And your credit would be that value. There is later, we'll get to it under 1.8.9, there is a carryover restriction placed on that credit after some period of time, after 5 years essentially. But we'll get to that in a minute. So you're gonna have a number. I put 1,000 units into my registered recharge facility. We're gonna take 10% off of that. So that's 100. So you're gonna get 900 credit that's now available in your next year. Then if we're in that next year, you're gonna tell us whether you use some of that credit to meet your consumptive use for that particular year. And that's how we'll be subtracting out of that credit bucket.
Are we stipulating whether somebody has to use that year's bucket or other buckets first? So like they'd have to run out of the others before they could use their credit, or could they just say, hey, I'm gonna use my credit and then make these other buckets roll over?
We are not stipulating, other than the fact that recharge credit will have a lifetime to it.
Right,
And so if you don't use it, it will ultimately get decreased and disappear.
right,
So you're incentivized by that to carry your groundwater forward and keep your recharge, use your recharge credit.
Your sustainable yield doesn't decay.
right, right, but I mean, it's just kind of a matter of semantics, but
No, it's a big deal.
yeah, it is. So it's like, it's gonna benefit someone to know this, so that they say, hey, I used my recharge credits, not my groundwater credits this year, roll my groundwater credits over.
Correct.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is we also, you could imagine hypothetically, you start stacking a lot of recharge credits and 10 feet of your groundwater depth is somebody's recharge credit, and sitting at a representative monitoring well, it's masking, well, it might look good. All of a sudden, we're like, oh, hey, maybe APA needs to adjust or something, but it's really
Yeah.
somebody's masked recharge, and then they pump the crap out of it because maybe they've sat fallow for a while.
A drought.
Or and they sell it to some of their neighbors and the groundwater drops really quick because we inadvertently gave they're holding too much of the elevation in the groundwater with a credit. So we have to put some sort of limitations to incentivize you to use that first.
But they could also do that with their pumping credits. They could also sit on it for 4 or 5
Well,
years.
yeah, but that's native water, and that's still, if that's what the groundwater levels are, that's what the groundwater levels are. Now we have the 48 inch per year use, which will temper some of that. But it is still native water then in that case, as opposed to somebody else's surface water stored underground, creating an elevation in the groundwater.
I think this is a conservative, good approach.
That's good.
Yeah, you know, with that explanation of it,
And over time, if monitoring suggests that we're over allocating the recharge, then but the monitoring will dictate the future.
yeah,
You'll see that under 1883 in the middle of page 5, so 1883, we'll evaluate this. Sorry, is
hello?
there a question online? Sorry, I'm not looking to see hands. Okay. 1883, the GSA will reevaluate the leave behind percentage on the 5-year updates unless anything else, other warrants, circumstances warrant prior to that. Just like we're gonna reevaluate some of the other things on that 2030 update. We'll take a look and say like, okay, do we need to retain more than 10% or not?
Right.
So that's set up, so 10% is what's on the boards right now, that's what's gonna work. We'll reserve the right to reevaluate that and modify.
Randy, one question, are you gonna remodify per zone or the whole GSA? The whole GSA?
Possibly per zone, that's what it says, located within the sustainability zone.
Why'd you use the word possibly?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances that are going on. So for instance, if you're in a super tight soil, your zone is predominantly clay or predominantly sand. If you're clay, you're probably not getting the recharge credit as much as you might think, or you have a lens that's sitting and flowing outward right to a channel. And so it may have flooded up in the late winter, early spring months of the year, and then just slowly seeped right out into the channel for the rest of the season. So there's no real water there. We may need to be able to adjust this so that 10% isn't enough for your project. It might be a zone-wide thing. If you're in sandy ground, maybe that doesn't get adjusted. So we may need to have a differential by zone or by specific facility ultimately. Does that help, Mike? So it's not trying to be penalizing anyway, it's trying to be
No.
more realistic of, not creating, over crediting something where then what happens is somebody, if I've given you too much credit, you're gonna pump it and you might hurt Blake or a domestic well or something,
But
right?
I like that we're not starting at like 25 or 30% leave behind.
Right,
Because we really gotta incentivize everybody to start.
That's-
right.
And
That's
spend the
exactly,
money.
that's exactly the
Yeah.
thinking behind the 10%. So 10% is really generous,
It's
right?
generous. Yeah,
it is right.
For a leave behind, but the thought behind that was we're incentivizing people to build the recharge bases and start doing this.
And hopefully the monitoring
And
is
hopefully,
positive
yeah.
over time and we don't have to go up.
So it's part
You
of
don't
the
have to increase
incentive.
that leave behind, yeah.
Yeah, cause it's kind of like the Walmart model. You're not gonna get anything if you charge more, so charge a little bit and you might actually get somewhere, you know?
Hadn't heard that described as a Walmart model, but I'll take your word for
Yeah. Cheap crap, you'll actually make more money.
it. Yeah. Always say at those concerts, sell the t-shirts cheaper, sell. Anyway, sorry. Well, moving back up that page a bit on page 5 is the indirect recharge using a conveyance facility. I think this is very important to point out. The alternative source credits for indirect recharge, so this is under 18821. Indirect recharge of an alternative source via conveyance will be quantified and determined on a case-by-case basis by the board. Determinations will involve the application of a leave behind, which will be derived based on data, studies, and other warranted information. And at a minimum, the leave behind would be consistent with that 90%. So we're, first off, or the 10%, whichever way we want to look at that. So at a minimum, there's going to be a 10% leave behind. It might be more depending on circumstances, unique situation. I mean, the East Side Canal, there's a long distance with a lot of potential variances that we got to make sure everybody's comfortable. We aren't redirecting issues. So we'll just look at those seepage studies and the board will make a decision. Same with LeGrand, your new canals. If you guys put a bentonite clay layer on the bottom, even though it's earthen, then maybe it's a different number than
Yeah.
if you had.
Well, we know our leave behind on all the other water we deliver. It's several hundred acre feet, it's over like 6,000 delivered.
Okay. The question is whether, is that, some of it's gonna be EVAP, some of it's gonna be any plants that are growing along there, some of it's seepage. Where that fits, we're just saying, since there's not a lot of conveyance facilities that are going to be getting this, the board can just handle it on a case by case and say, your
I like
canal
that.
gets that, your canal gets this. And then we start those accounts, and then each year you put a certain amount into that canal, and there's gonna be a quantity, and then there's gonna be a use that's maybe occurring in that year.
When you say there's not a lot of people that are gonna be utilizing this, what would be the thought on just a ditch going from a source of water to the field? Like in Stevenson, some of our canals are old ditches that are really, you know, five miles long or so. Sometimes you have to order an extra 3 or 4 CFS so that you can get what you want. I'm willing to bet that some of those growers are gonna be interested in thinking that, well, I'm losing and it's going into the ground. They're gonna be after this.
These are the arguments for why Merced should probably operate as one giant unit, because you commingle groundwater with that also, and you're not gonna get a seepage credit for groundwater you put in that channel. You are getting some from your contract with Stevenson that's going in there. How that distributes, one person takes it, one person doesn't. There's gonna be some accounting challenges,
Right,
but to the point you have laterals delivery system. That's a set of canals. Stevenson has, or the east side has a canal. LeGrand has a canal.
but still,
That's
it's-
really kind of it. It's not, there's not a lot, right? That's what I mean.
but if you're trying to look for a recharge credit, that even if McQuinn is all one big basket, that still doesn't address McQuinn. Cause McQuinn can't just sit there and create, well, we did pump this, but you know, that didn't all make it for our customer.
It
So
might,
how do you,
because you'd have the measurement at the front end, how much you got from Stevenson And that's the number that matters regardless of where it goes.
Yeah,
Well,
And
but
how much
like,
you pumped
it's the
in.
district's responsibility to divvy that up
The
to
district.
individual
And
accounts.
then,
That's what I was telling you.
and then you have your
Back to the
pumps.
farmer, individual
So
farmer.
you got surface water plus
You
your
pay
pumps,
for it.
and that's,
I'm gonna
you
want
could get some
Yeah,
seepage
that's what I was telling
credit
you.
associated with that delivery of 14,000. There's maybe some defined amount that's credited as seepage as you deliver that.
so let me make sure I'm understanding this right then, before I repeat it to McQuinn, because so if they have turned on wells or even create a head of surface water, for example, say they're sending 5 CFS down a lateral and the customer at the end is pumping out 3 CFS and the pumps are just barely keeping up. That's a 2 CFS discrepancy for 48 hours of that run. The GSA would be okay with McQuinn saying, hey, there's a 2 CFS for 48 hours amount of water here that we're gonna be able to count as groundwater recharge, and we're gonna
Yeah.
just take care of that in our own books.
Not if it's groundwater that you pumped into that ditch.
Well, but if you didn't utilize it, how is that different than
Then you're just circulating.
you're just circulating it? So.
But
If
if
you
you,
don't get credits for
But you
that.
don't get.
No,
if you took 5
Okay, yeah.
CFS at the
So
head
it's
from
surface water.
Stevenson,
So call it surface water
has-
then.
You gotta be sure there's no groundwater in the system.
Well, and that's,
That will confuse, that will, if you mix groundwater and surface water,
it will it
yeah,
is
it's
happening,
going-
it will happen.
That's how
will
we
happen.
do it.
Yeah.
you're
It's
gonna
gonna
have
We
to,
do it in the main
you're
canal.
gonna have to know beforehand how much surface water was contributed.
We have accounting of what goes
Yeah,
in at
yeah,
the
you
top.
know that, right?
But out at the bottom, at this particular instance, you could have mixed water at this point.
And you don't know as a farmer what percentage of your water you receive is groundwater or surface water.
There's days where the canal is so clean, it looks like pure water. And there's no contaminants like it's.
But on
So-
the seasonal
That's all we get.
basis, like, would you know, I mean, it seems like you would know how much surface water had been
For
delivered.
the benefit
Into
of the
that
folks
canal.
online, let's just try and have one person talk at a time, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking for, in Merkeen, for a lateral over a season, not on a daily basis, but over a season, I think you would know how much surface water had been delivered to the lateral.
I don't agree with that.
You don't, okay, so.
No, I'd
'cause
love
if you
to
don't have the
talk about it
measurement,
after the
then,
meeting.
Yeah,
I'd love to
You guys have,
talk to you
you
about
guys have
that.
some accounting to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so,
Figuring it
We'll
out.
figure it out.
so, but wait, but to bring it back home is if we can ensure that it was all surface water that was supposed to be being delivered and there's a 2 CFS discrepancy, McQuinn can handle that in-house and the GSA is not gonna have any problems with that?
GSA is gonna recognize the credit, and there's gonna be, you're gonna have to go back to your documentation and studies and show that this is what seeps when you put your surface water in. The GSA will recognize the credit and give it to Merkeen. Merkeen divvies it out to your members.
That's different, so that's different than how I understood his explanation.
I think it's
Well,
Because
because
that's
you just said that if McQuinn would handle it in-house and that's where so that we
You
would
would
have to
handle
have
giving it
studies
to
of
the
that
grower.
ditch. We would have to have studies of that ditch and we would have to know documented what that is. So you can't just take the 5 CFS, the 3 CSF and go that there's 2 missing and work with that. We have to do more to substantiate that claim, correct?
correct me if
Because
I'm wrong on this, because I think that the amount of water that you're gonna, surface water that you're gonna claim as Mercury is how much Stevenson delivers you. At the beginning,
Right.
and there is no seepage, because all that water goes into McQueen. There may be individual growers that want some seepage
I think that's the best way to handle it yet.
from
Is-
that McQueen, that's an internal issue. That then you're gonna have to report that.
I think that's the best way to handle it yet, when we try and just explain it to our growers is, we know what we got served from our surface water source. So there is no, essential seepage because your only loss is gonna be all through the satellite through your ETs, so everything else has to be accounted for.
I think there is a nuance that if you get 14,000 from from Stevenson,
Stevenson.
at the head of your, let's just say McQuinn is a farm.
Right,
I get 14,000 at the front of my farm. I now deliver it, but I'm super inefficient. And so only 5,000 I'd actually consumes, the rest soaks in the ground.
Right,
You guys are gonna wanna get some recognition that that's now available for you to pump out of the ground in a future year.
yeah,
So that determination is about how many miles of laterals you might be running surface water in. If traditionally your surface water only runs down a third of the laterals or 2/3,
right,
there's some determination about that. We're wanting, I think the GSA is just gonna need to try and say, you guys have to operate as one collective. You got groundwater sources and you got surface water sources. And the groundwater is subdivided into district pumped and private pumped. But collectively, there's only so much groundwater available for this geographic area.
right,
And so we need to find a way to do two things, credit you the surface water portion that does perk. Because there will be some seepage in the delivery of that. I will,
or even just out in the fields, because it's super sandy soil in certain areas.
well, in the fields, that starts to get a different story. Are you doing it purposefully under a flood mark activity, or is it just incidental to irrigation event?
Incidental.
It's incidental where that's all part of the baseline modeling that was in the groundwater
Right.
to determine everything.
Right, so
that's
maybe,
why-
maybe that's where we don't need to chase all the little decimal points here, and we just go, hey, zoom out as a farm, like you're saying. And our seepage is better off just to acknowledge it as in the, it was distributed. It's part of our inefficiency on a field, and that's good enough.
Right.
Maybe that's the better
I-
way to explain it to our growers.
And I think there's a couple of things that we can continue to work on to help figure that out in the best way, but
Yeah.
ideally, you know, I'm gonna go to Stevenson as an example. They're gonna
Right.
want a credit off the East Side Canal that's gonna be handed to, I guess, Stevenson, I think, although it runs through Merced ground, so I don't know how,
It runs through a bunch of people's ground.
it runs through a bunch of
That's
people's
still their
ground. So
water, that's still their water.
that's still their water.
Yeah,
100%.
So as long as we recognize it's all their water and is now going to get distributed to locations and fields of your grouped farm, there will be an accounting and you'll say, I took this much in from my agreement, my settlement with Merced, so I took in 20,000.
Mhm.
I don't know what the number is, let's just use that for example. I gave 14 to, well, we need to go higher than 20,000. So
Yeah, I didn't give 14 to
Oh.
20.
I don't, that's like, that's why, I'm lost on that math. Let's say I brought in,
give anything either.
I brought in 30.
So,
I have some seepage that occurred in the East Side Canal.
Hmm.
I sold 14 at the head gate to Merquin. So that's seepage plus the delivery that Stevenson is taking directly is gonna create a credit for recharge in the future, but is also gonna be partially used directly in that year
Mhm.
against groundwater or in lieu of
Mhm.
groundwater. And so that accounting, then if the next year we get super dry and nothing comes, or you only get, there's rules in that agreement with Merced, and you get, let's just say you get nothing.
Mhm.
That makes it easy. Well, you have groundwater plus you have a credit that you made last year, or maybe have for a couple of years, and you'll use that to pump out of the ground to meet all that demand. And then we modify that accounting number, and the next year you might add a new credit and start, there's one credit bucket that has a timeline, and the other credit bucket will each have a timeline, because they have to disappear after 10 years. There's no credit available if you didn't use it. So that's where I'm gonna move us now into section 18.9. It's all accounting for your alternative source credit. So beginning in 2027, you are going to, you're gonna make sure, we're gonna let you know what's available to you for that year from your recharge, or potentially a future year, subject to the carryover restriction. So you're gonna tell us in mid-December, hey, by mid-December, I put this much in the ground in 2026, and we'll be able to then say at the beginning of 27, okay, you have this much in your bucket available. So you can make your planning decisions however you want to try and farm for that year, because you might have something in addition to groundwater. Where we get into now at the bottom, 1893, is carryover restrictions of alternative source credit. At the start of the 6th year following issuance. So you got 5 years to use it. So I'm gonna pretend we're starting we put it in the ground in 2029. So starting 2030, I got my 1,000 units after I've discounted and everything. I got 1,000 units and it sits there for 2030. It sits there in 2031, sits there in 2032, 2033, and 2034. I haven't used a drop. There's still 1,000. Now at the start of 2035, 20% of that automatically gets deducted. So you have 20% less at the start of that next year. Whatever's left after that, let's say you still don't use that. So I'm now at 800 instead of my 1,000 I was carrying. I'm at 800 and I still don't use it. 20% more drops off into the next year. So now you're at, what, take off 160. So whatever that becomes, 640, right? And so then another 20% through the next several years until year 10, it automatically goes to zero. We're not going to keep infinity 20% reductions.
Mhm.
So you're incentivized in those first 5 years to use water you put in the ground. You may use some of it in a couple of those years, but whatever you're still carrying forward will start getting shrunk automatically as a carryover restriction, starting in the beginning of that 6th year after you have it available to you. Does that make sense?
Might be a stupid thought, but I'm curious about how long it takes water to get from the recharge basin in certain areas to the depth that you're pumping it from. How many years does that take? I mean, our area, it won't be that long because we're fairly shallow, but are there areas in the basin where that could be problematic?
So there is
I don't know.
a discussion. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where we had it. Adriel, can you say real quick where it is?
If it's later in the document, that's fine. I'm just
We'll
thinking
get
about
yeah,
it.
we'll get to
Okay.
it. It's
Okay, there's-
there is a
Direct recharge on the front page discusses.
there's a restriction, first of all, that says you have to pump from if you're getting the Corcoran clay layer, you have to pump from the layer you put the water into.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so that, okay. and
you
the
guys are gonna put it
Corcoran
above the
clays.
Corcoran, and the Corcoran's like at 200 in your area,
Yeah.
right? So you're gonna put it above, your wells are all pretty much all above, it's okay.
Yeah,
If you're somewhere where your wells are punched down below Corcoran, so even if they're screened across, they're
Right.
assumed to be pumping below, then that credit you're pumping has to have been like pushed in through an ASR to that lower zone.
right.
Otherwise, you need a dedicated well, which might mean a new well, which also is another reason for the 5 years, is you might need to put in some infrastructure.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the Corcoran clay. That kind of gives you it's not an infinity down.
Right, right.
That makes sense.
The folks in the El Nido Lone Tree region have been talking about investing in shallow wells for some time, and the GSA or the county made some adjustments so that they could replace wells easier to get new wells
Yeah,
above, so this has been a thing.
Is there a lot of water?
There's 0 water above the Corcoran right now in most places.
Mhm.
Everybody pumps below the Corcoran,
So
so no matter how much recharge you do,
Mhm.
that's why they need some shallow wells.
Mhm.
They're adjusting.
Because otherwise, we're gonna violate our subsidence.
Subsidence.
Right.
We'll never get there.
yeah, you'll never get there. 'cause-
Never get
yeah.
there.
And so we'll end up having to cut you off on pumping anyway, because we're subsiding still, we're exceeding our subsidence limits with the wells you have punched below.
Yeah.
Even though you're saying, well, but I'm recharging, but that water's sitting above and it's not, we're still violating something else, so we're gonna need to have that adjustment.
Triangle T Water District has done some amazing things with incentivizing recharge and above aquifer pumping. They'll, for one, they'll move above Corcoran water to farmers that don't have the infrastructure to make sure that they don't have, make sure they don't turn on their deep wells. They've paid farmers with hay grown in other areas to not use their deep wells in certain water year types. Because they'd rather buy hay than cause subsidence. All kinds of creative ways to incentivize recharge and be able to use it above Corcoran, what we're talking about. It's gotta be creative. We'll get there. And the subsidence areas. And they've seen it go from bright red on those heat maps to green because of these strategies.
Cool.
So this carryover, again, this is like part 2 of how do we incentivize recharge? Because I think most GSAs just have a 5-year carryover and then it goes away. So now you're looking at 10 years being able to use it. And so that was the idea behind 10 years.
Well,
It's
no
not
restriction
technical
for
based,
35
it's policy based
is
to
policy.
incentivize recharge.
Yeah,
And there's some, what you said, east side Turlock.
Turlock's down to
is
3 years.
3 years of carryover. to
East
Goodwill.
Turlock
East Turlock, yeah.
for their allocation.
And so there are multiple ways to try and address this. There is no perfect science on this unless you're putting a ton of monitoring wells around a recharge basin, which is super expensive. So we're trying to find that balance between incentivizing, but not redirecting impacts. So suddenly Brad's got all this credit and he starts selling it to all the neighbors. Next thing we know, groundwater levels have dropped and we're hitting domestic well challenges and we're paying out the wazoo to fix wells.
Yeah.
That's what monitoring will dictate.
Yeah, and so that's where we have to continually try and balance all of these challenges. So this seemed like striking that balance between incentivizing but yet not over allocating. That makes sense. So now we go to 18010 on the middle of page 6. Recognition and use of alternative source credits generated prior to January 1, 2026. So importantly, the board wanted to identify this and create this opportunity. Parties that took actions after the adoption of the GSP on January 28, 2020, and prior to January 1st, 2026, when all of the rest of the rule of allocation goes in place. If you took an action where a direct recharge or a direct use in lieu of groundwater of an alternative source occurred, you'll be eligible to receive credits. Two important things to recognize here. The aspect of taking water like the flood water that happened in 2023. That really is like we just discussed in the prior sections. But this is just saying, hey, we'll recognize it did happen. You may have some dedicated recharge ponds that happened. There's some ponds that were built out in Stevenson. We need to, again, know what amount quantities of water went in there, other things, if there's any.
We did it in Amsterdam too.
Okay, Amsterdam with some recharge ponds. So some things happened.
Several.
And then some people also paid to buy water. There was a source, there was an action that was taken specific to anticipation of sigma. So the signing up for MID's contracts to buy water at 300 and some odd an acre foot, or just 300, whatever it is an action that was specific in a way to try and address sigma. So that gives you an opportunity to get a source credit for that looking backwards. In the first case, any of that credit associated with a recharge action will get the 90% leave behind also. And I think that applies to all, is that right?
Great, but isn't most of that water being used on time?
If you purchase the water and put it in the recharge basin.
You had to put it, not,
You had to put it in the recharge
Okay.
basin, there's your 90% leave behind.
okay,
And then the other part of that is if you purchase the water and used it directly, you would get a credit for that as well.
Yeah,
And-
Everything Mark Queen bought from Stevenson, or Merced
no, I'm talking
ID,
about,
and you get credit for that too.
well,
Right.
it's the actions that were after the adoption and anticipation of the allocation rule. So the board was representing this as things that were not part of essentially the baseline activities that were happening. So those contracts that were signed as an example, I'll give a couple of examples here. The MID contracts that some outside of MID growers signed on for was post 2020, the $300 water. There are, and so that would be an action they took because they knew Sigma was going to restrict them and they wanted to get an opportunity to get an alternative source of water. In contrast, you have some water rights holders on the Merced River, some riparian users, maybe even a few appropriators. That is part of the historic use of water that's in our baseline modeling that has ended up setting up our current sustainable yield of native groundwater number. So the distinction would be what Stevenson has brought in historically and then sold part of that to Quinn is part of that baseline. That wasn't something done as an addition to in anticipation of Sigma.
Mhm.
The flood actions taken during the EO, if you guys successfully did anything under the TUP, but I don't know if anybody did. If
No,
so,
there was none
Not
under
under
the none
Yeah,
of
I don't
that,
think,
but
yeah.
they just claimed it
under the EO,
Yeah.
because it was much easier.
right. So those EO
Or
actions.
less risky.
The EO actions would be recognized as something, if anything had been diverted under those TUPs, even this year, if anything was being able to be diverted under, you know, if we run into some trigger,
It would be the EO only.
well, it'd be 1242.1 right now, right?
Yeah, work.
And we could get a crazy,
There's news.
you know, the March, oh, that's true, that just changed your determinations. You know, we could get a crazy March and we
Mhm.
suddenly have a bunch of
Easy.
water running. And people are gonna be able to do something, so we're trying to accommodate those things to give some back credit. They all get applied to the 90%, they all also have this 5-year rule, so if you did something in 2020, you would have gotten it available in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. It's going to, as you start into 26, it's going to be 20% discounted from that if you had done it in 2020. If you did it in 23, you're already 3 years into that, right? So you get credit in 24 for action you took in 23, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, you'll get 50% or 20% of that cut. Sorry.
It's gonna help you at the beginning.
So it's a starter pack
Mhm.
for some actions that were taken that are trying to be recognized, and the board wanted to be able to recognize that.
Mhm.
So that's what's in here under section 1810, is trying to address that.
Greg, so you're gonna, try to adjust that for the year 26 also, this year, 25? Goes from
25 counts,
25 counts
26 does not.
If you do something
this
this
year.
year that is not your normal practices, like EID, if MID makes water available again this year,
Correct.
that will count as an action of a direct in lieu of groundwater, that people will get some credit going forward from that point.
So we've talked about this in the past, but it didn't gain much traction. If we're gonna do it for this year, why don't we give credit to the people that decide to fallow this year already?
I raised that question, and it's a good
It's the same
question.
thing. It's the same thing.
I have asked,
Better.
and the response has been, and I'm not saying right, wrong, or different, some of the response has been interesting idea, good idea. Others have said, well, that's not for Sigma, that was for other financial reasons. I don't know how we start to separate those, because
It's very difficult.
these are policy questions. So I would suggest that if TAC or individually, anybody feels strongly on that point, that it is something that's brought up to the board at the meeting on the 13th.
Mhm.
To that point.
I would say groundwater levels are a driver for not planting fields. Is that a Sigma driver? That people have been rotational fallowing with the groundwater in areas for a long time,
Groundwater too high, too low.
too low.
Just kidding. Might be too high, I can't get in there.
No, but they
No,
run
it's-
fields. I don't know.
It's a fair question, Mike, and it has been brought up and discussed, and this is what the board is going with at this point. But this is exactly why they said, in particular, the board asked, we need this stuff to come to TAC.
Yep.
To get response from TAC on different thoughts and insights and opinions and responses. So this is brought forth to start, knocking it down, adding to it, whatever. You can see there's a lot of different pieces here.
So let's talk about how it would be written. So it would be if it was. If crop demand was reduced from a certain amount to a certain amount, from let's say 3 to 0. Within this time frame and was not replanted, then through 2026, then you would get. What that previous crop credit is.
I say give them 24, because we're gonna do 13 inches plus 11 APA, so that's 24 inches. Let's just give them an extra year of 24 inches.
That's the easy way.
That's so simple to where I could call Lacey, very few people are gonna do this. You might get 20 farmers that do it, because nobody really knows what the GSA is yet. So these 20 farmers would be, call Lacey and says, well, Lacey, I'm not gonna farm this year. She could either drive by or ET's gonna show that it wasn't farmed. And then they would get a credit going forward.
It's easy.
It's simple.
I'll chime in on this one if everybody can hear me.
We got you, Lou.
Thank you. I don't have strong opinions on this. I think anecdotally, in my circumstance, we haven't developed about 200 acres because we're waiting on Sigma. And arguably that has saved the basin, a bunch of water. But the reason that's sticky is, or rather the distinction is when you buy contract water from MID, you're writing a check today. Me deferring or you taking up trees pending Sigma, I'm not having money come out of my pocket to make that investment. I'm just kind of waiting. So, I mean, if somebody's taking out almonds, for example, because almond prices were low and there's happens to be a correlation that the basin saves some water, I'm not sure that people should be getting credit for that because it's hard to decide whether they're doing it for water savings purposes or for not. And I know in my personal case, I haven't developed ground that I plan to develop, and that's the side effect is we're saving water. But the reason I haven't done it is I'm waiting to see what happens with Sigma. But the nice thing about it is I haven't written a check to develop that ground versus buying contract water from MID. You're spending money for that investment every year.
One thing on the contract water with MID, as I understand it, and I don't think Lacey have seen the contracts themselves, but it's been told to us that they're essentially a take or pay, so you gotta take the water.
Yeah.
And you gotta pay the $300, even if you could, if it's made available to you, you gotta go spend the money, even if you could say, no, I'm good, I bought it for the next 8 years. You gotta take it and you gotta spend the money versus pumping.
And you have to prepay.
No, but it's per year. You don't pay for the whole 8 years.
Right, no. My point is, if you signed up a couple years ago, when was it offered? 21?
Yeah, that's the first year.
So if I said, okay, I was really buying it for the second half of those 10 years, when I know an allocation's in place, I want that backup supply if it's available. But I don't want to actually take it in any of these first years. That'd be a choice to just not spend the money and we continue to pump groundwater because there's no allocation in place that would stop you. So I could see that differential, that once the allocation is there, then if MID's water is available, you're gonna buy it.
So that's not the case though, Greg. If you
Not the
didn't,
case. It's a take or pay contract.
That's my point is.
or avoids it too. Like if you decide not to take it this year, you can't take it the following year.
Right, that's my point on that contract. Since that contract is written that way, it is a forcing
Yes.
you are spending a big chunk of money to it because you have to, but you really were buying that insurance for the future. Kind of, because otherwise, other than the contract saying that it'd be null and void if you didn't pay for it, you really don't have any reason to have taken it yet because there's no allocation that would restrict you. But you had to in order to continue that insurance policy for when you do want it to be a supplemental supply against an allocation. So that's a little bit of a distinction, I think, kind of building on what Lou was just saying about whether you're making choices for agronomic or other business economic reasons. That's one of the things the board was talking about with those MID contracts. Relatably, the EO diversions or anybody that might be doing recharge physically, it was something new that was done post those times. There can be a distinction. It is gray, to your point. It's a gray area. And the board has come down and said this right now. And they're asking for input.
But TAC could say, we want something like you're proposing. And then see what the board, that's why we're here.
What's your opinion? I just think.
I think if people sign up this year. And there's like an official start, going retro like this is doing would be very hard with following, but if someone signs up and says, I'm gonna follow a field and then we can verify it. To give them 24 inches when Sigma starts, I think that. Sets the basin off in a better spot.
Maybe instead of them pulling out the trees next year, they do it this year. We're saving water. If this is what we want to do, let's give a little incentive.
They might have done it already, I guess. The balloons.
It's getting late.
Yeah.
It's getting late.
No,
People for the almond trees. For the
I'll
thing.
harken back to what I said at the outset. I don't have strong opinions on this. I just wanted to voice the counter argument that, you're not coming out of pocket by, deferring something and maybe you push it over for another reason. So I'll follow along with, well, I'll most likely follow along with everybody else's opinion on the matter, I guess.
It's just not trees. I mean, tomatoes use 3 feet of water, so it's
Alfalfa.
alfalfa. So decisions are still being made. Maybe it's corn, I still gotta buy my corn seed.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't farm it, or a lot of farmers won't farm it if you incentivize them not to reasonably. I mean, they're not.
That's where the markets are. It's like,
Yeah,
markets, if you get a little bit of advantage for next year, maybe you'll take it.
yeah,
Yeah,
or maybe instead of 24, we give them 20. They don't get the whole buck, the whole thing,
But you don't give them APA.
or, okay, yeah, or maybe we don't give them the APA, we give them something. I just think that if we do wanna save water and we're gonna recognize the stuff that's done in 25, then why not recognize somebody following some ground to save water? And it's money, they're not writing a check, but it's money that's gonna come out of their pocket, because if they're not growing the crop,
They're still paying taxes.
yeah,
yeah.
and if they're not growing the crop, they're gonna lose money. They might not write a check, but they're not gonna get one.
I'm trying to refine what you're talking about a little bit. I want to see if there were some bounds you were putting on there that I may or may not have heard. Did you say possibly just for 2025, or were you saying also potentially backwards looking?
No, just 25.
Just
Yeah,
25.
that's what I was
And
agreeing. I thought that is doable.
Only
then
25.
okay, I'm just trying to make,
Because you registered at the beginning.
and then possibly one concept would be you give them the native yield credit of 13 inches.
Minimal.
I'm on board with that if it's 2025. If we're talking 2025 and beyond. I'm fully
I
on
want
board with
25.
I think 26 is.
If they filed the appeal in 2024, and then they hear about this opportunity and say, I'm just gonna stake fallow.
That's fine.
What we heard from the land repurposing program was, well, if you don't accept me in the program, then I'm just gonna plant. And then you're gonna lose water. And they were already fallow, so they weren't going to be taking an action. They just wanted the incentive to continue fallowing. And so would you allow the incentive to continue fallowing if they're gonna turn to you and say, well, I fallowed in 24, I'll continue fallowing in 25?
Maybe they had to have a crop consumption of over 14 inches. Or 13 inches the
Yeah,
previous
and
year.
it,
That's
Like-
that's what the land repurposing was, is you had to have consumption the previous, we did an average of 3 years.
Either
Because
one,
otherwise, you're not really changing your land use, you're already kind of built in that you're already fallowing.
yeah, you want it to be that year. You get the
You're
same.
incentivizing action for this year, not action
Exactly.
you already took.
Yeah.
Correct.
the challenge, first off, all great ideas, where it starts to become a little challenging, we'll have to figure out if this were to go forward is I have 4 fields and I fallowed those 2 and I'm gonna plant those 2 and fallow these other 2 now to be able to get through that. Yeah, I did grow on these crops last year, but in the whole of my account, I didn't make a difference. So do we have to look at it within the whole AMA that there's a potential change, like additional fallowing? I don't know. And I'm not trying to argue one way or the other. I'm just
Let's
saying
not
there's
even
got,
go there.
Yeah,
We can what if all this stuff, really.
yeah, I mean, because then you're also assuming that the acreage amounts are the same between 2 fields and all that. It's.
Okay.
I think that part of it is you're even getting it into the farmer's head that fallowing could be an option for him,
Gotta be a requirement
you know?
to comply.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be in their head, so why not start it though?
Well, because you have people who don't even know what a GSA is.
Okay.
So
Maybe it's like all
you're trying to just get it out there and go, you drive by and say, hey, wait, why is his field not planted this year? He always plants. Well, that starts a conversation. Maybe you're
Mindset
spending,
has gotta change, you're right.
yeah, so even if we don't necessarily see a return on the water necessarily, maybe you see it in outreach of starting conversations and going, hey, wait, what's going on over there? Why?
I like that.
You know,
Yeah,
it's just a
That's
thought.
a visual.
I mean,
Does
it's-
it go from here to the
Ad hoc.
committee ad hoc, or does it go up to the board?
So at this point,
We're
this
gonna
is
quorum.
gonna go to the board in March. I don't know if the language itself is gonna go, but the concepts are all gonna go to the board in March. So this could be, TAC Is this a recommendation? You don't have a quorum, so maybe TAC discussion on this item could be just given to the board when they discuss it at their meeting in March.
I mean, we could talk about it more and then, I mean, I think you're the perfect guy to go up at the next GSA meeting and say that the TAC reviewed it, and this is what the TAC thinks. Because that's gonna be the.
Do you guys think that, or just me and you?
I don't know, I said we have to talk about it here more.
No,
I mean, he was
You heard-
talking
you
about
heard
it.
Lou say he was on, so.
I think it's great.
Well, Lacey, let me ask you this. I mean, it sounds like a really good idea. From an administrative standpoint, my thinking is it sounds like it's really designed to be simple to administer. Is that the way you see it?
There would have to be some sort of form and attestation, and then we would spot check. It depends on how many there would be. I guess my question for you guys is there's incentives with the low leave behind and the extra carryover. There's a lot of incentives. At what point, because you're incentivizing the few who are able to do those things. And at some point, it's coming out of the bigger pie, because the pie isn't growing with these incentives.
Yeah.
You're just shifting water around. So at what point do you feel like you're over allocating to some groups to the reducing the allocation quicker in the future, perhaps, to everyone else? And that's the balance that I think about when you're giving a lot of incentives to those who are active, but then the majority of the basin may not see those incentives, and they may see a quicker decline of APA or a quicker shift of sustainable yield in the future because of these actions.
A couple comments to that. One, that's what I was thinking when it came to the recharge facilities, because I guess not all recharge facilities are the same. And if you have the clay soil and you don't have good recharge, I don't know, I don't know what would, why somebody would not be incentivized just to dump a bunch of water on their clay soil and, claim a recharge credit, even if it doesn't go into the basin. So I'm not a hydrologist, and I'm not quite sure where the incentives are on that one. But to this one, I think if you did give the grower credit, just for 2025, to Blake's point, I think it would start a lot of conversations over some beer, where neighbors are talking about it, like, well, I'm not going to farm this year because, whatever X crop is down anyway, but I got to bring a little bit of water over for Sigma. And I think it would spark a lot of conversations regarding Sigma, because this would be kind of the first affirmative act anybody can take to save water. So far, Sigma's just been academic for everybody. And I do think it would just be a fringe issue. I think it would only be a few growers. So, I mean, to Blake's point, I think it would be optically, it could be a good selling point.
Is the only action we're talking about where growers are actually turning pumps off. Like,
Yes.
the other stuff you're doing recharge and there's leave behind that helps and you're buying surface water. Yes, you're turning pumps off then, but in this instance, it's land that had pumps going last year and this year doesn't. And frankly, it was a heck of a lot more than 14 inches, more most likely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really the first affirmative act we can take, because we're all waiting to see how, this stuff shakes down. So it would start a lot of conversations over the bar table or wherever.
Lou, if this did happen, you like you brought up, you've got some land that you're leaving out. Would there be any not you personally, but do you think someone in a similar situation as you might have some animosity that they wouldn't be able to participate if they were already waiting?
Yeah, but yes, of course. I just don't think you're not. I mean, of course, I would love credit for the 200 acres I'm left out, but you're not going to make everybody happy here. And where do you draw that line?
I agree with you. I just wanted your thoughts. I think you said exactly what I was thinking. You got to do something. So let's at least do something, right?
Yeah, just let me earn the goodwill of falling on the sword for this one.
We'll call it the Lou Meyer Act.
I have a question.
That joke would have presented well better in person, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, so when we think about incentives, do we think about like inclusivity and equity in that cases? Because I'm thinking about the small scale farmers who are doing like mixed farming, mixed vegetable farming. They are only like, they have only 10 acres of land or maybe 20 acres, like 50 acres at most. So they cannot keep, because that's their lives. So I'm thinking about the incentive, will it be like only encouraging the big scale farmer instead of like including all types of farmers in this kind of incentives? Like, do you think about those issues, or you just encourage people who are willing to uh, follow the rules to get incentives?
So I'm gonna frame it, like, to that question is, put any of these things aside, starting next year, everybody's gonna get 13 inches of native yield and 11 inches of APA that's gonna be ramping down depending on where groundwater conditions are. They stabilize, you may be able to stabilize that number. So everybody's going to be ramping down universally.
Mhm.
That is going to have disproportionate impacts on your ability to grow because scale matters. I mean, that's a reality of farming, I think. And so one of the things that I know has been kicked around as ideas is, are there ways to do collectives where those growers can share, where this particular 10 acres doesn't grow this year because the other 5 or 6 10-acre parcels do grow, and they're all helping incentivize that person. And then next year they swap that. So it starts to rotate around. It's no different than a large grower taking 10 acres out and moving that 10 acres around, right? From the perspective of the basin, we have to consume less groundwater. That's our bottom line. And so we have to figure out how to do this. And if we start saying, okay, well, certain size growers don't have to reduce, or certain acres of plots don't have to reduce, we're gonna have a challenge, I think, in front of us really quickly. So I don't know the right answer to try and deal with that. It is a challenge. I'm not trying to diminish the issue at all, so please don't take it
No, no.
that way. It is a hard issue, and I think we need to find collective opportunities where, like we've talked about in some other basins, I don't know if we've talked about it here, but the idea that several of those growers can join as one account,
Mhm.
active management account, where we're gonna track, that starts to create flexibility for them to work as a collective, just like if somebody with more parcels might have a larger operation, they can group all those together as one, multiple fields operating together. They can follow this field and irrigate these and then swap stuff around. If we can create those kind of opportunities, small growers to form some sort of groups in that manner, that gives flexibility that could be useful.
Mhm.
Outside of that, it's the incentive side. If we're looking to do something just for this year, I don't know if there's a lot of small growers who especially growing like vegetable and truck crops and stuff like that, they're probably not going to just say, I'm not going to grow this year because I want 13 inches of credit going into next year. That might not be a driver for them. Just like it probably, to Mike's point, there's not a lot of growers who are going to want to do that per se. It's going to be really dependent on a variety of things, including market conditions for whatever they were going to plant. The truck crop markets, I'm not super familiar with how flexible or how varied those are compared to some of the other big commodity markets. And so I don't know if they face that same instability. They may, just not an area I'm familiar with as much. I don't know. Thoughts from anybody around the table on?
I back you up with that, because I've been trying to think about what is the small, 5-6 acre guy gonna do, or with your example earlier, where you mentioned that they really divvy it up by rows even.
For example, if there is a 10 acre of land, there will be like 5 farmers
Right,
growing like 10 types of vegetables in the same parcels.
right. So my thought with that is, how are they, what well are they having access to? Or is that well only for that 10 acres? Because then at that point, that's probably a really big investment to have one well only surface 10 acres. So my thought is that in general, as far as trying to create policy around that, it's more it's more likely to have a policy situation where you're gonna have people who have banded together already. Or they're gonna take that and they're gonna have rented that out to a bigger operation that's already working in in a bigger situation, creating your group. It's gonna be really hard to get on a per person situation, a per acre as far as, massive policy.
One of the questions I had when you raised that example earlier is that parcel, let's say it's a 10-acre parcel, is owned by somebody,
Yes,
and then they are leasing individually, like you get 100 yards of this,
yes,
and you get the next
yes.
whatever yards, and you grow whatever, and you manage it however you want. So that owner is the one who's in our account system who gets a credit. Now, the relationship between that owner and those 5 different growers who all have different strips of land is gonna be now unique to that relationship.
Yeah.
Because the water is to the parcel and to the owner of the parcel. So if that owner of that parcel, and I'm just gonna throw out some things, because I think this is important for us to try and get this messaging out. I'll pretend to be the grower. I have, a bunch of these people with little strips of land, and I take my allocation and I transfer it to Lacey. I got no water for any of you, but I can do that, and you're still, suddenly you turn on the pump and it's dry. Am I violating a lease agreement? I don't know. So there's a big question about how the relationship between the owner and the tenant may be in those situations and how they divvy it up, that we probably need to help figure out.
So I would like to make a comment on the relationship. So the thing is, like, they have a big competition among themselves, even though they're using the same land, they're growing similar kind of products, they're selling to the same market, like farmers market, or I'm not sure if you know the lease market here. So they are coming from like multiple growers, maybe from the same parcels. They fight with each other with like who can like sell with higher price,
Right.
where they can sell it. So the relationship and like balancing out each other, I'm not sure
It's very
how,
competitive, right?
yeah, how this gonna happen in
So
those.
if you, Lacey, and I were growing on the same parcel that was owned by Blake, we're fighting about how I'm gonna do my little secrets and get to market before you, because I
Yeah.
can upsell you and kill you on your market opportunity. And Blake's just sitting there going, like, I don't care, you guys are all paying me the same. Unless the relationship is he gets a percentage of my revenue, which I don't know what those tenant relationships are.
But
That's a
Blake-
challenge, but Blake has the water.
He's gonna
Blake's,
say, don't use as much water though.
Blake's the one who's got is going to get the fee if the parcel overuses and the 3 of us overuse water, Blake's getting fined.
Right.
Now, how Blake comes and talks to us about that is again, a question that the GSA doesn't know and doesn't really want to get in that business of knowing,
Right.
but we should figure out how to get that message out and get that understanding and help facilitate those conversations. Right? I mean, it's fun.
Just to
No.
get Brad here, guys. Jeannie can, hopefully she is not weighing in on this level of detail, but you can visit with her later. I don't think you're allowed to sublease a portion of a parcel. I think the MAP Act prevents that. So this is maybe more of an academic conversation than anything.
No, ag is exempt from subdivision map act.
Well, I'm corrected.
Yeah, as far as the GSA goes, it does go to the parcel, so it would all fall on, in that example, it would fall on me. That I would have to figure out how I'm gonna divvy out the water that goes with my parcel. So if I don't do my job as a landlord, that's on me, and I will get the fines, and then it'll be up to the people that have entered into a contract with me to figure it out with me. I'm not really seeing how the GSA needs to get on this micro level of, this zoomed in.
That's the landowners.
Yeah, it's
I
on
agree.
me.
Okay, one comment to make. So I met a grower in Miyabusa. She was a landowner. So she got a like example like penalties of $15,000. And she told me that I was having heart attack because I don't know what's this. Then when I tried to make her understand what's the process and how Miyabusa is like estimating that penalty, she was like, She never heard of the word Sigma. She doesn't know what's
Yeah.
going on. So that's the thing is like before like delivering these masses, they need to know like what's Sigma and what's these
Yeah.
policies. And it's already 2025 and we are talking about like adopting this from 2026. And I'm not sure if we have enough time to like, I'm not
So
sure.
one thing I would suggest that and we can talk more about this after this meeting and everything, is that we get our mailing list to you somehow, and maybe you can help us figure out
Of
who is
course.
not, because we've been sending mailers out.
Yeah.
But they
In
don't
Spanish,
use, they are
in
not.
Hmong, in Spanish, in Hmong.
And
in
now
English.
people are tossing it, I'm not saying that, because even big growers are not wanting to think about it or hear about it or pretend. But to your point, we need to help the communication, but we can't stop the implementation.
Okay,
So we just have to help get the message, and you're a great channel.
Mhm.
Then we're gonna need to coordinate a little bit more about how you can help us help you.
but there is no, like, there is no scope of any modification or anything based on the, like, farm size, income level, their situation, because like, I believe, like, suppose for the small scale grower, like $15,000, if she had actually, like, it would just wash off like her whole life, like, how come
Right.
she would pay like $15,000?
Ma'am, there are large corporations going bankrupt because of Sigma, the same way. Like,
This is coming down from Sacramento.
all levels.
This isn't us.
there's
this is
large
Sacramento's
growers going
law.
bankrupt and there's small growers going bankrupt.
So are we taking the community as like compromise or sacrifice for Sigma? Like the whole community will be washed off if we
This
do
is a
not modify.
disadvantaged community.
Go talk to
nightmare.
Sacramento.
So,
Disadvantaged
This is from
community nightmare.
Sacramento.
So let's have a conversation with you after we
Yeah,
wrap
sure.
with the tech,
Yes.
because I think
Yeah.
there's several things we want to try and figure out how to get messaging out to you, but, so if you're happy sticking around after
Yeah,
that,
sure,
please.
sure.
Okay. Ben, I know you had some. Not anymore? Okay.
Yeah, and just to follow up on this, there was a current sub-basin probationary hearing last Thursday, and very much the same conversation came up.
okay.
For the current basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And in Fuama County, I think the small scale farmers are protesting against a large corporation who are using like 70% groundwater. And for them, they are like suffering these like rules and regulations, and they all came together and protesting and boycotting and taking help from UC Davis Law Clinic. So I think like in some areas, if like that happens, that will be like chaotic, right? If like it was a conference and she said it loudly in front of all the growers. So that might intrigue some ideas, right?
We want to have some more conversations about how to get messaging out, how to look for opportunities. The goal of the GSA and this allocation is not to drive farming out of business and
Mhm.
destroy the communities that are based on farming. The purpose is we have to get groundwater levels up, and we got to figure out how to do that in a way that minimizes effects across the board on economies, the county's economies, on disadvantaged communities, individual growers, everything. So let's talk more after.
Yeah, sure.
If you're fine.
Yeah.
I want to wrap up this conversation here on the the alternative source.
So what did we, real quick, Greg, what did we decide? Are we gonna recommend anything?
Oh, sorry, coming back to that, yes, you guys were making some point, the notes I have, and I know Lacey was taking notes too, that the potential for fallowing in 2025, and we would probably have to put a deadline
Yeah.
to present some information to us, that there could potentially be a credit equivalent to the sustainable yield native groundwater of 13 inches. That it's good optics and a good discussion starter type of thing. Your question was, or the discussion was also, how are you bringing this forward? I think, and Lacey and I can talk about this also, but I think we could float this in emails to the ad hoc, because we can have a conversation with ad hoc,
I think
and at least frame it.
I think
We
that's
should
nice.
before the
Yeah.
board meeting, and then you guys also would intend to bring it up at the board meeting as a conversation from TAC. Lacey would say it as part of a staff report item
Yeah.
or something too.
Yeah, we can say it, but I think hearing it from you guys has a heavier weight.
We had a good discussion, I mean.
They already don't like
Lacey
Lacey and I.
Yeah.
We can talk to board members, can't we? Can
Yeah.
We can personally talk to board members?
You can
Okay.
personally talk to board members in advance, absolutely.
Okay,
Just not three of them.
not as a TAC committee.
Or six.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can take it, you can take it to them personally.
okay.
This is a thought I had, this is, this is something that I've
But-
considered, or,
And I think the framing of it, like we can send an email off to ad hoc and
Okay.
just say, hey, this came up at TAC. So,
I think that's
and that
good.
can happen this week. I would imagine, it's only Tuesday right now.
I think
so
that's good.
We should be able to do that. I think that would help frame it
Okay.
for that purpose.
okay.
Does that answer that question?
And guys, do you need anything from a voting member? Because I have to leave.
No, we don't have a quorum.
Because we don't have a quorum.
I guess,
We're done.
yeah.
So the last thing is 1.8.11, alternative sources and alternative source credit is really about how you're using this and how you're reporting it to the GSA. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, guys.
And so it's just setting up some more things about, you gotta be able to send us information. One of the things that we have to think about, this would be no different if I'm pumping my sustainable yield of native groundwater out of the ground using a flow meter. You're gonna measure a number, let's say it's 1,000 units. And we know that all 1,000 units was not going towards consumption because part of it is inefficiency in irrigation. So we were applying those efficiency factors. And that efficiency factor, let's just use 80 for this discussion because your irrigation system and your soil types, we're gonna give you 80% of that 1,000. So you got 800. That will be now what your consumption, what water was put towards your consumptive use, or it counts as your consumptive use was 800 units. And then if you only had groundwater, you'll say 800 minus whatever I had available in my buckets. Similarly, if you have a credit from a recharge, you're also pumping that out of the ground. So you were given the credit, what's in the ground, you're gonna pump it out, it's gonna be applied that same efficiency factor. That's what this section talks about also. Because again, it's a quantity of water that not all of it, 100% of it's meeting consumption, some subset of it is. And so that's the relationship that will be used to help assess how much of that credit gets subtracted out for against consumption. So that's what this section is talking about. And that pretty much wraps it up. Obviously, there's details in all this. There's some limitations on transferability of any of this stuff. And then there is the distinction that says, I think it's on the back page, on page 8, under 1.8.11, 2.3.
Yeah.
The extraction of alternative source will be limited to the aquifer in which the alternative source was percolated. Any well is screened above and below. So this goes back to that cork and clay conversation we we're just having. That's where it is.
Yeah.
So this again fits in with the monitoring stuff that you've seen before, both the monitoring, which has the effective precip element in it. And this builds on the thing that was adopted last October. There's a few more, there's some data sources we still have to add on here. A couple of other elements that Adriel is working on to continue to bring things forward with this intent of trying to have all this stuff available as new red line draft for adoption by in the April meetings. So any other questions or thoughts or comments from anybody online or in the room? A lot of silence. Is there anything else on our?
We didn't get as quite as into it as the last meeting, I guess.
Getting worn down.
Yeah, it's a little trickier and more technical. Yeah,
Now, you guys are not, there's not a voting board here. As you read more of this, as something comes up, I mean, again, these are bring comments forward when the conversation is occurring at the board meeting on the 13th of March. And any other time, I mean, you guys could submit comments and thoughts that can get shared and contemplated, so it's not like you have to wait for that moment in time.
right.
So read through more of this, digest it, any other questions or things?
I guess one thing I want to say is that I can appreciate what we're doing to get this, 10%, for example. We're trying to promote this. We're trying to do good things to. No one's going to go out and buy water, $300 water, and have to leave a lot of it behind. So you'll get nothing. So that's good. I kind of want to I want to say pat myself on the back, but I do like my idea of that you start having some followed fields around, it's gonna start creating conversation, and it's gonna be able to reach out to other people who, you know, hadn't been involved or haven't learned. And that's gonna do something that we haven't been able to do yet, because we've spent many a meeting trying to figure out how to increase our outreach.
Mhm.
And I think that's gonna be a good thing to, not a good thing, but it's gonna be a tool to increase our outreach that we haven't been able to do yet.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah,
There are lots of things to do and lots of conversations.
right.
Just making sure you can stick around for a second.
Um,
You know, you guys are ambassadors as part of technical advisory committee out to the broader
Right,
community as best you can. I know that's not easy. You guys have day jobs and night jobs and
well, but
jobs.
it's also because we're out there in you're bumping into people, you know,
so that point of your conversation of like, this is a conversation starter, you know, even
Yeah.
these things like this are conversation starters that we're hoping you're the voice out there. And if, we've said this before, if there's a desire for any kind of special presentations at any other board meetings or any community meetings that we can figure out, you know, let's get those scheduled, let's get those out there. We need more, and we need
right,
further conversation. This, as we've always said, this is a massive change to the farming community. It's between Madera and Merced, they're the two largest, one by volume, one by percentage, demand reduction programs in the state of California. It's not a good thing to be able to say and be holding up as like, woohoo, we're the biggest, best, but that's the reality that is occurring that you guys are dealing with and that Madera is dealing with, and it's not easy. So I appreciate you guys' efforts to really be trying to find some clean pathways.
well, and I think we can also appreciate what you guys do too, because we've heard some stuff from other basins and what we're trying to do as far as leniency and everything else, it's been acknowledged that we're doing better than a lot of other places, and we're trying.
We're not in probation
Yes.
yet. Don't say those words, Ben.
Yeah,
Okay, so your next meeting, March 25th, we're still on the monthly meeting schedule until, through April, I believe. So we'll see you March 25th, and we're adjourned at 3:47.
Thank you.
thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody online.
Question.